There comes a moment in every life when silence grows louder than noise, when the laughter fades and the world turns down its volume, just enough for you to hear something more profound, more powerful, more eternal than anything you've ever known. It's in that moment, in that sacred pause, you feel it, that presence, that force, that whisper that doesn't come from around you but from within you. You may call it intuition, you may call it spirit. But make no mistake, it is God, and yes, God is real. We live in a world that measures reality by what it can see, touch, count, and control. It bows to science, honors logic, worships data, and walks with skepticism. And yet, the very breath in your lungs, can you measure it before it enters your body? The dreams that visit you in the silence of sleep, can a ruler grasp them? The love that breaks your heart wide open, can any microscope dissect its depth? No, because what is real isn't always what is visible. The truest things in life, the things that move mountains and raise the dead parts of us, are often invisible to the eye, but undeniable to the soul. You can feel God when you're on your knees, not because you're weak, but because you've finally let go of the illusion of control. You can feel God in the storm, not because he causes the wind to blow harder, but because his voice rises above the thunder with one message: I am with you. How many times have you been down to nothing, no strength, no plan, no answers, and somehow the exact door opened that you never knew existed? That wasn't chance, that wasn't coincidence, that was evidence. When you've cried tears into your pillow that no one saw, but woke up the next day with peace that didn't match your circumstance, that wasn't random, that was reassurance. When the fire didn't consume you, when the rejection didn't define you, when the betrayal didn't kill you, and when your own failures didn't become your ending, who do you think carried you? It was God. Not a theory, not a myth, but a living, moving, unshakable presence, more real than the chair you sit on, more constant than the sun that rises, more powerful than any man who claims to hold authority over your destiny. God is not a concept. He's not some ancient story to soothe simple minds. He is the creator of your breath, the architect of your purpose, the one who knew you before your mother even had a name for you. God doesn't ask for your perfection. He asks for your belief, because belief is the birthplace of transformation. When you believe God is real, everything changes. Your fears shrink, your vision sharpens. Your past loses its grip, and your future, no matter how uncertain, starts to feel safe in his hands. You see, people will fail you, money will fluctuate, bodies will grow old, fame will fade, but God never wavers. He doesn't change like the seasons, he doesn't grow tired or distracted. He is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. There is a reason your soul longs for something bigger than yourself. There's a reason you hunger for meaning in a world that profits from confusion. The reason is simple. You were not created just for the earth, you were created by the heavens. Inside you is the fingerprint of God himself. That is why no matter how many winds you gather, you still feel incomplete without purpose. That's why even in a crowded room, your heart can still ache for something higher. That's not a flaw. That's your soul reaching for its source. God is not just found in churches or temples. He's not confined to sermons and scriptures. God is found in moments, sacred, personal, undeniable moments, when the doctor says there's no hope and the patient walks out healed, when the addict hits rock bottom and rises up clean, when a child who should have died in the womb comes out crying with life. These aren't stories, they're testimonies, and the common thread in every miracle is the presence of God. He doesn't need a stage, he doesn't wait for applause, he just shows up right on time every time. Some will say, if God is real, why is there suffering? But the question itself reveals the blindness. Suffering exists not because God is absent, but because man has misused the freedom God gave him. Freedom to choose, freedom to build or to destroy, but even in suffering God remains. He doesn't remove the fire, but he walks with you through it. He doesn't always stop the storm, but he strengthens your spine so you can endure it. Faith does not promise a life without trials. It promises you'll never go through them alone. And when you believe God is real, your trials begin to look like training grounds. Your pain becomes preparation. Your delays become divine setups. Don't let this world convince you that God is a crutch. God is not for the weak. God is for the willing, willing to believe in something they cannot see, willing to trust when logic fails, willing to surrender control in exchange for divine direction that takes strength, that takes courage, that takes faith. Every champion who has ever changed history had a force greater than themselves. They weren't just smart, they weren't just strong, they were guided, they were led, they were favored. That favor didn't come from popularity. It came from presence, God's presence. God will use your lowest points as launching pads for your purpose. He will use what the enemy meant for harm and flip it into the very fuel that drives your breakthrough, but only if you believe, only if you choose to stand in the truth that He is real and He is near. Stop waiting for a lightning bolt. Stop looking for burning bushes. The fact that you woke up this morning is proof that God isn't finished with you. The fact that your heart still beats means you have a purpose that hell couldn't destroy. You weren't born by accident. You are not random. You are not expendable. You are the result of intentional design, handcrafted by a creator who calls you his own. He placed something in you that this world cannot steal, silence, or suppress. That something is divine. When you walk with God, doors open that no man can shut. When you honor God, favor follows you, not because you are perfect, but because He is merciful. When you put God first, every other thing starts to fall into place. Not always the way you expect, but always the way you need. Do not let the noise of this world drown out the voice of God. The world will distract you with doubts, fears, and shiny alternatives. It will offer you substitutes, money, power, lust, fame, but none of them will satisfy the deep hunger in your spirit. Only God can do that, because only God made you, and when you finally come to the end of yourself, that place where your own strength runs dry, you will find the beginning of God. And in that beginning you will rise, not as who you used to be, but as who you were always meant to become. The truth is not hidden. It's just often ignored. But for those who dare to believe, who dare to surrender, who dare to walk by faith and not by sight, the rewards are endless. You will find peace that makes no sense. You will find strength in the midst of weakness. You will find direction when everything around you screams confusion. And you will find hope, not hope in man, not hope in systems, but hope in the eternal, unchanging, undeniable reality that God is not only real, He is here, right now. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to be a theologian. You don't need to quote every verse. All you need is a heart that says, God, if you're real, I'm ready. And when you say that with sincerity, He'll show up, not always with fireworks, but often with a stillness so powerful you'll feel it in your bones. He'll speak to you in ways the world can't understand. He'll guide your steps in paths that make no sense to the natural eye, but every step will lead you closer to your purpose. This is the moment, not tomorrow, not when you're older, not when life is easier. This moment right now, this breath, is your invitation, your call to believe, to wake up, to rise, to return to the source. Because God is not far, God is not hiding, God is not silent, God is real, and He's been waiting for you to realize it. And once you begin to realize it, not just as a passing thought, but as a truth etched into your consciousness, everything begins to change. Your entire world shifts, not because the external circumstances are different, but because your perception is now aligned with a power beyond the flesh, beyond limitation. You begin to walk with an inner authority. You speak with conviction, you move with purpose, because you are no longer walking alone. You stop seeking validation from people who don't understand your assignment. You stop explaining your vision to those who were never meant to see it. You stop chasing things that were never aligned with your destiny, because when you know God is real, you also begin to understand that He is selective with your battles, deliberate with your delays, and strategic with your suffering. Even your setbacks begin to make sense, not in the moment, but later, when the dots connect, when you look back and realize that what you thought was punishment was actually protection, that what you called a delay was actually divine timing, that what broke you was allowed to break the old version of you, so the real you could rise. That is how God works, quietly, strategically, precisely, and you'll miss it if you're too distracted by surface-level noise. You'll miss it if your ears are tuned only to human opinion and not divine wisdom, because his voice isn't always loud, but it's always clear, not to the flesh, but to the spirit. You begin to trust what doesn't yet make sense. You begin to obey even when the command seems uncomfortable. You begin to act in faith rather than react in fear. And with every step, you begin to feel more aligned, more grounded, more unstoppable, not because of who you are, but because of who walks with you. It is then that your life stops being ordinary. It becomes marked, set apart. You notice the difference. You may not always be the most talented, but doors open for you. You may not always be the most qualified, but rooms make space for you. That's not luck. That's favor, and favor is proof of divine fingerprints on your life. This isn't about religion. This is about relationship. A relationship with the very force that created you. A relationship with the one who knew your failures and still chose you. The one who saw your darkness and still called you light. The one who heard your cries and still declared victory over your life. When you walk with that awareness, when you carry that reality, you stop negotiating with fear. You stop dancing with doubt. You stop entertaining small-minded thinking, because now you've seen too much, you've felt too much, you've come too far to pretend God isn't real, and what's more, you begin to attract differently. You begin to speak differently. Your atmosphere changes. People can feel something different when you enter the room, not because you're showing off, but because God is showing through. You begin to operate from a place of peace that this world can't buy, from a strength this world can't steal, from a joy that doesn't come from circumstances, but from connection, a connection to your Creator, and in that connection there is clarity, there is power, there is destiny. Even in the silence you can hear him, even in the waiting you know he's working. Even in the chaos you trust his plan, because now your trust isn't based on what you see, it's based on who you know. And you know God is real, and when the trials come, as they always do, you no longer crumble, you no longer panic, because you know that every fire you go through is refining you, every rejection is redirecting you. Every mountain is training you, every valley is humbling you, and through it all, God is shaping you, not to break you, but to build you. You begin to realize that faith isn't about escape, it's about endurance. It's about walking through the fire without smelling like smoke. It's about sleeping in the storm while others panic on the boat. It's about standing when everyone else sits, speaking when silence is expected, rising when the world says you should stay down. Because now, you know who holds your future. You know who authored your story. And no matter how dark the chapter, the author hasn't stopped writing. As long as you have breath, the plot is still unfolding. And if God is the author, then victory is the final line. You begin to realize that your pain has purpose, that your tears are not wasted, that your sacrifices are not unseen, that your private struggles will become public testimonies. And all of it, all the highs, the lows, the delays, the detours, are working together under the hand of a God who never wastes anything. You stop envying others because you understand your journey is custom built. Your path is tailored, your calling is unique. You weren't created to copy. You were created to conquer, not by your strength but by His. You stop begging for open doors and start preparing for the ones He's already ordained. You stop chasing things that feed the ego and start cultivating what feeds the soul. You stop running from the uncomfortable because now you know discomfort is often divine instruction in disguise. God doesn't show up to coddle you. He shows up to call you higher, to challenge the limited version of yourself you've been settling for, to shake you free from mediocrity, to expose the greatness He placed in you before you were even born. And the more you walk with Him, the more you begin to realize that everything you thought you needed was just a shadow of what He had prepared, that the relationships you cried over were just preparation for the ones He ordained, that the doors that slammed shut were a setup for the ones He was opening, that the losses you mourned were actually lessons in disguise, and you begin to thank Him, not just for what He gave you, but for what He took away, not just for the prayers He answered, but for the ones He denied, because now you see His no was never rejection. It was redirection. It was protection. It was preparation. This awareness, this awakening, transforms your life. You start to make decisions from a place of discernment, not desperation. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding spiritually. You stop trying to control every detail and begin to flow with divine timing. Because now you don't just believe in God, you walk with Him. You no longer pray just for outcomes. You pray for obedience. You no longer ask for ease. You ask for endurance. You no longer chase applause. You seek alignment. Because you've discovered something more valuable than success, status, or security. You've discovered the source, and once you've tasted that, nothing else satisfies. Once you've experienced that, nothing else compares. You begin to carry yourself differently. You speak life, not because you're trying to be positive, but because you've seen what happens when God breathes on your words. You give not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you've experienced what it means to be blessed so you can bless others. You forgive not because they deserve it, but because God forgave you first. And when you start living from that place, when your whole being becomes a living testimony, you become unstoppable, not because life gets easier, but because your anchor is deeper, your roots are stronger, your vision is clearer, your faith is immovable, and though storms may come, you no longer fear them, because now you know, the same God who calmed the seas can calm your soul. The same God who raised the dead can resurrect the dreams you buried. The same God who spoke light into existence can speak purpose into your chaos. That is the power of walking with the knowledge, not the theory, not the hope, but the knowledge that God is real. And when you walk in that knowledge, you begin to live with boldness that cannot be taught, only caught. A boldness that is birthed not from arrogance, but from assurance. You're no longer trying to prove your worth to anyone, because you know your worth was established before the world ever knew your name. God validated you when He formed you, He confirmed you when He called you, and He anointed you for an assignment only you can fulfill. This world thrives on confusion, distraction, and noise. It will try to drown you in opinions, bury you in pressure, and lure you into comparison. But when your ears are tuned to the voice of God, the noise fades, you hear clearer, you see sharper, you act wiser, and you begin to move differently. Not rushed, but ready, not frantic, but focused. Because you know who you belong to, and you understand that when God assigns a mission to your life, He also assigns provision, protection, and power. You don't have to manipulate, you don't have to compete, and you certainly don't have to conform. All you have to do is remain connected to the source, to the Spirit, to the truth that your steps are ordered. And when your steps are ordered, even your missteps become part of the plan. Even your mistakes become part of your message. Even your breakdowns become blueprints for breakthroughs. That's what happens when God's hand is on you. He doesn't waste a moment. He uses all of it, the mess, the miracles, the tears, the triumphs, as tools to sharpen your soul and expand your impact. You start to realize that everything you went through had meaning, that nothing was random, that every detour was a lesson, every closed door was a redirection, every heartbreak was a pruning. And the more you reflect, the more you see it was never about what you lost, but about what He was making room for, because God is not in the business of subtraction. He's in the business of multiplication. But sometimes he subtracts first so he can multiply later. He removes people, positions, and plans that do not align with your purpose, not to punish you, but to protect the promise on your life. And when you trust that process, even the painful parts begin to make sense. There's a certain strength that rises in you when you realize God is not a distant observer, but an active participant in your life. You don't pray out of ritual. You pray out of relationship. You don't worship out of habit. You worship from hunger. You don't seek Him just for blessings. You seek Him because He is the blessing. This is the shift. When you stop asking God to simply change your situation and start asking Him to change you in the situation. Because when you change, your world changes. When your perspective is elevated, your problems lose their power. When your spirit is aligned, your path becomes clearer. When your identity is rooted in God, you no longer live in fear of loss, because you know that what's yours by divine design can never be taken by human hands. You stop chasing temporary things because you're now building eternal impact. You start living for something beyond today, beyond trends, beyond popularity. You start measuring success by obedience, not applause. And the more you walk with God, the more you realize you weren't created to blend in. You were born to stand out, not for your glory, but for His. Not to shine your own light, but to reflect His. Because when people look at your life, they should see something that can't be explained by natural means. They should see the hand of God, clearly, unmistakably, undeniably, and let them wonder, let them doubt. Let them question how you keep standing when others have crumbled. Let them watch as doors open, as battles are won, as peace surrounds you in chaos. Because your life becomes a living sermon, a walking revelation that God is not only real, but He's active, involved, and in control. You stop fearing the unknown because you've come to know the one who knows all. You stop hesitating at the edge of purpose because you've learned to trust the leap. You stop needing all the details because faith doesn't need sight. It needs surrender, and surrender doesn't mean weakness. It means wisdom. It means you've realized that God can do more with your life than you ever could with your limited logic. It means letting go of control so you can grab hold of destiny. It means trading anxiety for authority, confusion for clarity, scarcity for abundance. The more you surrender, the more you're elevated, not always in ways the world notices, but in ways that shake the very foundation of who you used to be. You become more patient, more discerning, more resilient. You stop wasting time on distractions, on drama, on empty pursuits, because now your focus is fierce, your mind is renewed, your steps are intentional, your heart is anchored, and even in your solitude you don't feel alone. Because now you walk with a constant companion, the Spirit of God Himself, whispering truth into your ear, breathing strength into your spirit, guiding your hands when you don't know what to do, giving you words when you don't know what to say. You begin to carry a presence, the kind that shifts atmospheres, the kind that speaks louder than titles, the kind that can't be bought, taught, or imitated. It's divine, and it's undeniable because it's not you. It's the God in you. You no longer live by the world's clock. You live by divine timing, and while others rush, you wait. While others panic, you pray. While others chase, you listen, because you know that one word from God can do more than 1,000 hours of your own effort. That's the power of walking in alignment. That's the strength of living from revelation, not reaction. You're no longer triggered by circumstance. You're transformed by truth. You don't fold under pressure. You rise with purpose. You don't crumble when doors close. You trust that better ones are being built, and every day becomes sacred, not because it's perfect, but because it's part of a perfect plan. Every moment becomes meaningful, not because it's grand, but because it's God-ordained, and every challenge becomes an opportunity, not just to survive, but to glorify. When God is real to you, the world no longer intimidates you, because you've seen behind the curtain. You've tasted what's eternal, You've experienced the presence that no counterfeit can replicate, and now you can't go back, you won't go back, because forward is calling, purpose is pulling, and God is leading. And when God is leading, your path may not always be easy, but it will always be necessary, necessary for your growth, necessary for your elevation, necessary for the development of the character required to carry the calling placed on your life. He doesn't just hand you the blessing, he trains you for it, and the training ground is often unfamiliar, uncomfortable, and misunderstood, but it's also holy. You begin to understand that what looked like isolation was actually consecration, that the seasons you felt left behind were really seasons where God was pulling you ahead, away from distractions, away from misalignments, away from counterfeit versions of your future. He will strip away what's not real so that you can fully receive what is. This is how you begin to live differently. You measure time by transformation, not by calendars. You don't count your progress by visible milestones, but by invisible shifts, how your faith got stronger, how your mind got clearer, how your voice got bolder, how your convictions got deeper. That's growth, and that growth is evidence, evidence of His hand, evidence of His presence, evidence that God is not a concept or an idea, but a reality you live, breathe, and embody. You stop waiting for signs because you become the sign. You become the proof that a surrendered life is a victorious life. You stop trying to impress people and start impacting lives. You speak with power because now your words are filled with wisdom forged in the fire. And when you open your mouth, people don't just hear you. They feel what you carry, and what you carry is weight. Spiritual weight, not heaviness but authority, not pressure but presence, the kind that doesn't boast but breaks chains, the kind that doesn't flaunt but frees, the kind that doesn't dominate but demonstrates that the supernatural is still alive and active, because when God is real to you, miracles don't surprise you, they follow you. Breakthroughs don't shock you, they surround you. Doors don't confuse you. You walk through them with confidence, knowing who opened them. You stop praying from a place of begging and start praying from a place of believing. You no longer ask, can He do it? You start declaring, He will do it. And not from wishful thinking, but from spiritual certainty, because you've seen too much, you've been delivered too often. You've been sustained through storms that should have drowned you, battles that should have broken you, and nights that should have taken your mind. But you're still here, and not just here. You're rising, not because of your ability, but because of His anointing. That anointing carries you through what others sink in. It elevates you where others were eliminated. It keeps you hidden until the moment you're meant to be seen. And when that moment comes, you won't need to force it. You won't need to manipulate it. You won't need to prove anything to anyone, because real favor announces itself. It introduces you into rooms your resume could never enter. It places you in positions your background never qualified you for. And it sustains you in places where others fall, because God doesn't just place you. He keeps you. That's why you stay humble, not because you're unsure of yourself, but because you're sure of God. You don't take the credit. You don't touch the glory. You let your life be the stage where He performs His purpose. And in doing so, you become a vessel, not for fame, but for fire. Fire that burns away the lies, fire that ignites other souls, fire that draws people not to you, but through you to Him. You begin to crave solitude, not to be isolated, but to be intimate, to hear His whisper before the world shouts, to align your heart before the world pulls, to stay rooted so you're not shaken when the winds of life start blowing. Because life will shake, storms will come, but when your foundation is built on the reality of God, you do not crumble. You conquer, and when you conquer, you don't do it quietly. You don't hide what He's done for you. You testify, you speak boldly, not to show off, but to show Him off, because if He did it for you, He can do it for them. If He brought you through it, He can lead someone else out of it. Your life becomes a living blueprint, a walking sermon, a silent invitation to seek what you've found, and people will start to ask, what changed in you? They'll notice the peace in your eyes, the power in your presence, the clarity in your speech. And you'll smile, not because you're perfect, but because you've been purposed. Not because you're the answer, but because you carry it. And when they ask, you'll point up, not to the sky, but to the source. Because you'll know, beyond all doubt, God is real. So let the world doubt, let the skeptics question, let the critics scoff. But as for you, stand firm. Stand as living proof that the invisible is more powerful than the visible. That faith is not weakness, but the greatest strength a human can possess. Let your life be the undeniable evidence that God is not just a belief. He is a presence, not just a theory. He is a truth. Not just a part of your story. He is the author of it. The time for silence is over. The time for fear is finished. Now is the time to walk boldly in the reality of God. Speak as one who has seen. Move as one who has been chosen. Live as one who has been called for such a time as this. Because when you truly know that God is real, you don't just live differently, you become unstoppable. So let the world doubt, let the skeptics question, let the critics scoff. But as for you, stand firm. Stand as living proof that the invisible is more powerful than the visible. That faith is not weakness, but the greatest strength a human can possess. Let your life be the undeniable evidence that God is not just a belief. He is a presence, not just a theory. He is a truth, not just a part of your story. He is the author of it. The time for silence is over. The time for fear is finished. Now is the time to walk boldly in the reality of God. Speak as one who has seen, move as one who has been chosen, live as one who has been called for such a time as this, because when you truly know that God is real, you don't just live differently, you become unstoppable.